Hello and welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Brussels Report. Brussels is also experiencing the cold weather this week, although so far there's been no snow. However, daytime temperatures have been as low as -6 degrees, so Belgian farmers will have had to deal with the frozen taps and water drinkers, which no doubt lies ahead of Irish farmers over the next few days. Meanwhile, on agricultural matters, the Commissioner has returned from his visit to SIA, the major French international show, where he met with French President Macron and EU lead Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier. Back in Brussels, the EU awaits with interest what the British Prime Minister will say about the UK's Brexit position on Friday. This follows the leader of the opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, committing on Monday that a future Labour government would keep the UK in a customs union, though it would still leave the single market. Elsewhere, the Agriculture Committee of the European Parliament has been considering the Commissioner's communication for the Common Agriculture Policy after 2020. The report is expected to have up to 30 recommendations, and it will be debated in Parliament in Strasbourg on March the 12th. To debate this and other issues that matter to farmers across the island of Ireland, I'm joined by the Parliament's Senior Vice President, Mairead McGuinness. Mairead, you're very welcome to Farmers Journal TV. Can I start by asking you, the Commissioner published his CAP communication back in November. How has it been received in the committee?
Well, in general, I think the Commission communication has been broadly welcomed, but in the detail there's some concern, particularly not really from an Irish point of view, but from countries that have regional administrations. One of the big fears is there's a sense among some colleagues that this might result in the renationalisation of the Common Agriculture Policy. That's been one of the biggest issues we're talking about in the corridors. And I know that Commissioner Hogan has said, no, that's not the plan. I mean, the idea where Brussels dictates less, if you like, and that the member states have more flexibility to deal with local situations, I think it makes sense. So those of us who look at it from a common sense point of view see a lot of good in this, but there's still an awful lot of flesh to be put on the bones, not just on how it will be implemented, but what we're implementing and how much money we'll have to actually fund the policy. So while we're being distracted somewhat by the communication and we have to deal with it, I mean, there are bigger fish to fry in terms of the budget, firstly, and then how it's going to be redistributed, because it will not be done as it is today, but we're not sure, even from the Commission's thinking, what they have in mind as to a new model. So, as I read it, the situation of the basic payment plus greening will go.
That leads me into the second point that I want to raise with you, and that is around the budget. Of course, this negotiation's against a backdrop that has never occurred before. The UK has departed. That leaves a considerable gap in finances. Do you envisage a cut to the next Common Agriculture Policy in money available?
Well, my objective, and a lot of us are fighting here to make sure that there isn't a cut in the Common Agriculture Policy. But look, the reality is Brexit looms large. It will have an impact on the overall budget. I mean, the Commission put out some pretty scary figures in recent weeks, saying that the possibility of a 30% or a 15% cut in the agriculture budget, I don't think any of those are realistic, but it was, if you like, a wake-up call to member states that if you value the Common Agriculture Policy with words and you want it to continue, then member states are going to have to contribute more in order that the policy isn't cut. And cohesion is also, if you like, under threat as well. When you listen to Commissioner Oettinger on the budget side, he talks more realistically about a 5 or 10% cut. Now, I've given a very clear message to him from the stakeholder meetings we've had in Ireland, which Minister Michael Creed has led, because farmers have said to me, we want an increase in the budget. There can be no possibility of dealing with cuts, and I've delivered that message. We have a long road to travel on this to make sure that member states are prepared to contribute more, because the Taoiseach has said that Ireland will contribute more.
How will Parliament go in this, do you sense? Because there's a lot of interest represented amongst the members from the different countries.
Yeah, and let's be frank as well. Members of this House do not all support the Common Agriculture Policy as it is today. A lot of members think it needs to do more for the environment, and it probably will be asked to deliver more on the environment. I've just come to this discussion from a meeting of Agri and Development Committee, and again, sometimes in that context, agriculture policy gets a bad press.
Is the CAP seen as something bad towards developing countries in Africa and towards Africa? Africa that you had it on today, is it seen as an obstacle to development in the continent of Africa?
Some member states see that still because they fail to realise the reforms that the Common Agriculture Policy has gone through. We don't have export refunds anymore. We allow imports from African countries. They can block our exports by putting up tariffs, but we can't do that, and indeed we shouldn't do it in return. So I think those who understand the policy know that you can't blame the Common Agriculture Policy for all of the ills of Africa. But we do need, because of our concerns around migration, and we're going away from our own internal discussions, we do need to help African agriculture develop, because that will make it easier for people to live in Africa and not to migrate towards the European Union. So in a way, this whole budget debate is not just about agriculture cohesion and these policies in silos. It's against a backdrop of Europe needing to do more on migration and also on security and defence. But we need new money for that, and that's our bottom line.
There's two other big issues that are a backdrop to this negotiation as well. I suppose one is the prospect of trade deals, particularly with Mercosur, where there will be a huge beef quota expected by the South American countries. Where is that negotiation at the moment? It seems to have gone a little bit quiet in recent days.
Actually, there's a complete silence on this, and as I understand it, not particularly. As I understand it, Brazil is mulling over what's on the table from the European Union. It has to give more on industrial goods like cars in order to get what it has already on the table on agriculture, because it's not going to get any more. And I get a sense in which we're not sure if this will go over the line, and clearly from an Irish perspective, and my colleagues from France are the same, we don't want this Mercosur deal. So it is a little bit quiet. I mean, we're still watching it and trying to keep tabs on what's happening, and we're mindful that the impact would be bad for European agriculture. I think it's also fair to say, though, that there are forces here who want a deal. So we have to be mindful that there are as many people looking for a deal as are opposed to a deal. So two things come into play here. One is that the deal, if it happens, does not come into effect tomorrow. And I think an awful lot of the really frightening figures and about the future are that this could happen tomorrow, and it would be Armageddon, especially with Brexit on top of it. This would be too much uncertainty. So that wouldn't be the case. There's also an interesting debate now, I don't know whether you've had this time to look at it, about whether it is better for us to have an agreement on Mercosur with the UK in, because they are in at the moment, than not have an agreement with Mercosur, and perhaps the UK, when it's free of European Union membership, which it seems to desire, might go and do a trade deal with Mercosur. That certainly wouldn't be in our interest. So as in all of these things, it's not like a black and white situation. It is complicated.
On the issue of Brexit, and that is the other big topic of the moment in Brussels, and again it's all interlinked with the Common Agriculture Policy review. Where is that heading now? The Prime Minister in the UK is expected to give a keynote address on Friday where they will outline the UK position. It seems as if the UK position is that they want to retain what's best of the European Union and let go of the rest. Can the UK sell that view in Brussels, do you think? Will Brussels be accommodating to UK needs?
I'm going to ask you, what do you think? But I mean, clearly this will not work. I mean, I don't think you can actually validly argue that I'll take the best and leave the rest. It's not tenable. On the other hand, I think the European Union, there's three strands of work here. One is tomorrow we will see publication of the legal text on the withdrawal agreement, including the Island of Ireland issues. Secondly, the transition agreement, which has to be part of all of that by October. That needs to be agreed, and it's not agreed yet because the UK are being a bit difficult on citizens' rights. And then thirdly, this new relationship, new trading partnership with the United Kingdom. And Guy Verhofstadt, the Parliament negotiator, was very clear today in committee. He said, look, we want a close partnership, but we have to make sure it respects the European Union's principles as well. So I hope on Friday that the speech will clear up a lot of the uncertainty. But if you're to ask me frankly, will it? I'm not so sure, because I think we are still having the debate within the Conservative Party about what sort of Brexit they want. We've seen Jeremy Corbyn's intervention this week, which is also quite interesting because he seems to understand the value of a customs union. And we also, from an Irish perspective and an agriculture perspective, I mean, I'm interested that there are DUP farmers who voted to leave, whom I know, and I've discussed this with them. They still want their milk to come to the south for processing and to be exported to Europe, and their lambs to come for processing and be exported to France. And when I tell them that that's what happens when you're in the European Union, but it might change when you leave, I think the penny hasn't dropped there, and it needs to drop.
That would work within the Jeremy Corbyn interpretation of it. If the Labour Party got back into power in the UK, he would stay within the customs union. That would enable products travel back and forth across the Irish border. But yet that doesn't solve the Republic of Ireland's need, because our great need, as indeed is Northern Ireland's, is to get product to Britain across that channel. So we need, in reality, we need, from an agricultural perspective, all of the UK in a customs union.
We do, and that's why we keep repeating it. But clearly the UK keep repeating their intention to leave both the single market and the customs union. And what I'm trying to do in all my interventions is make sure they understand exactly what that means. And for Ireland, trade and this new partnership, we want it to be as close as it is today. But it cannot be the same as it is today, because the United Kingdom will be a third country. Will it be a third country that's far removed, because they're talking about ambitious divergence, which is something I haven't quite got my head around, because normally people try and converge when they're doing business, not diverge. So what's going to happen around that piece? And clearly from a farming point of view, people are, breeding cattle, they're planning their farming systems with 1 and 2 and 3 years in advance, and they're hoping that things will remain the same. And I suppose my job is to try and make sure they do, but also to bring some reality to the debate in the public space and in committee, that, the idea that you can have the best and leave the rest just will not wash, and therefore I hope that this week we see some clarity on that.
So there's a long way to go?
Oh yeah, but not too long, because remember, all of these details have to be thrashed out by October of this year, and when you see how long it took us to get to a first phase, which was only in December of last year, and we're into March almost, and we still haven't got to transition and beyond.
Has real engagement taken place yet between the UK and Brussels, given that the UK are still working out their position?
I think it depends on the level of the engagement. I think there's engagement, but the trouble is that those who engage then go back home, and in the Tory party, in the Conservatives, there is division. So you can engage all you like, but if there isn't actual engagement that writes down and is committed, and we can trust that level of engagement, it seems to change. It's rather fluid. So I suppose what we need is more concrete engagement. I mean, it's going to be very tough, because again, the United Kingdom hasn't understood that if it leaves the European Union, it is a third country, so we have to negotiate all of the details of trade as we would with another country. Now, we have various models to work off, but the UK don't want those either. They want something special. But we need to define special and close and partnership and all of those warm words, which I welcome. I absolutely welcome them, because my constituents need them to be translated into reality. It's just I haven't seen the bones put on those words to make me confident that we will reach a good conclusion in time. And I think that's really the pressure we're under. It's a time pressure.
Mairead McGuinness, Vice President of European Parliament, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's it for this report from Farmers Journal TV from Brussels. Stay tuned for what no doubt is an eventful few months that lie ahead here in Brussels.